Hello, you are watching the nightly Nintendo show where every night we react and discuss the latest Nintendo stories and headlines. We try to do this every work night, so around 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. That's where we're going. Excited for the show. I am too. Thank you, Megan. But we don't really have a specific time narrowed down just yet. I promise you we'll get closer to where we need to be with more information in the near future. More importantly, this show is live broadcasted on YouTube. So if you want to participate in the opinions and the discussions, share your thoughts on any of the topics that we discussed today or henceforth from this day onward, feel free. You can find us a Nightly Nintendo Show. Just search it up on YouTube or the Heart Containers YouTube channel. Not the Nightly Nintendo Show YouTube channel, just because Heart Containers actually does a few more things than just Nightly Nintendo Show. So you might want to stick around and subscribe, see what else you like. And then after that, I try to post this on podcasting services like iTunes and Spotify so that you can still listen to the show even if you don't want to participate live. Although I think there's a lot more fun if you do participate live, because then you can tell me when I'm wrong about things or when you feel really passionate about one of the things that we're talking about. So that's kind of the gist of the nightly Nintendo show. So let's kind of get into today's news.
Well, the wait is over. This is Nintendo DS. My body is ready.
We would like to play.
A way to make 3D games a reality. And it's called the Wii U Game Pen.
We're going to start off with some Nintendo headlines, move into Pokemon. There's been a lot of Pokemon scuttlebutts in the industry over the past couple weeks, actually. That's because people have those games, Pokemon Sword and Shield, in their hands, thanks to review copies going out, leaks, data mines, stuff like that. So there's been a lot of conversation about Pokemon. And then finally, we're going to finish off by a little conversation, a little discussion about Zelda Breath of the Wild 2.0 potentially coming out as soon as next year. Isn't that exciting? Now, I haven't actually dove into any of these stories because I feel like that's part of the fun of what I want to do with the show, is to react along with you guys. I just kind of saw the major headline pieces, gathered everything, organized everything, but I want to read it with you guys. So Chinese video game giant Tencent wants to create console games with Nintendo characters. I'm assuming that kind of means that they want to make the games themselves, but then license Nintendo characters. But let's kind of get into it. Earlier this year in April, Tencent was given the approval to start selling New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe Switch bundle in mainland China. So before we get more into it, I just want to highlight the importance of this in case you don't know. You can't just go into China and start selling your video games without their approval. It's quite difficult if you've read anything about the topic. Nintendo themselves, they've been struggling over the years, over generations, to get more penetration into the Chinese market because it's an enormous market. But exactly how to do that, well, it's kind of difficult. And one of the most common ways to do that is to pair with a Chinese publisher or a Chinese developer and have them kind of jump through the hoops for you. So that was a test from Nintendo themselves to pair with a different publisher, Tencent in this case, to start selling one of their prime games for the Switch, New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, in China. And they saw shares increase by 13% for Nintendo. Obviously, that's because of how much potential the Chinese market has for Nintendo, so no surprise there. Now there's a new report from the Wall Street Journal, apparently, that Tencent has revealed it wants to expand its reach in China by targeting console players within the United States and across Europe. And how it plans to do this is by using Nintendo's characters. Here's the official statements. What we want is to expand from China, and one target is console game players in the US and Europe. We hope to create console games with Nintendo characters and learn the essence of making console games from Nintendo engineers. That's a really interesting concept to think about and to consider, that some other publisher wants to take Nintendo's themes, they want to take Nintendo's franchises, intellectual properties, and they want to make something with them. That doesn't sound like something Nintendo would be up to do. I mean, Nintendo has kind of been more lenient, I would say, over the past few years with their intellectual properties, with their characters. I mean, just this year, we saw Cadence of Hyrule, which was an indie developer taking the Nintendo Zelda franchise and merging that with Crypt of the Necrodancer to make something new and to make something different. So Nintendo isn't a stranger to that idea, but it doesn't seem like Tencent wants to make small spin-off titles or anything like that. It seems like Tencent wants to take Mario, they want to take Zelda, and they want to make a Mario game, a Zelda game, because I'm guessing it is much easier for a Chinese company to do that themselves than it would be for Nintendo. And then they kind of get the benefit or the the relationship between Nintendo and Tencent would be that Tencent gets to make some of the money because they made the game, and Nintendo also gets to make some of the money, but because Nintendo's IP is kind of slapped onto the game's faces, well, then it might be worth a little bit more, I would say. I mean, how much do Chinese audiences really know about Nintendo's properties? You would assume a lot, but at the same time, because how strict the game industry has been for Nintendo in this case, and as a whole for Chinese penetration and Chinese market, I don't know. You would assume that they are kind of strong, but not necessarily as strong as they would be in other places. This is a really interesting partnership. I would assume that Nintendo might go for it just so that they can have more access to China, but it just sounds like a really weird deal for Nintendo to say, okay, here's all of our stuff, do what you will, as long as you give us part of the profit. That's essentially what's been going on here. Let's read the second half of the article, see if we can get some more information. Tencent is skillfully pursuing silent global domination. That's absolutely true. Tencent is a very scary company. If you didn't know, not only do they have partnerships with more companies than just Nintendo when it comes to the video game industry and beyond a little bit, they own a lot of companies. I think Tencent just wholly owns Riot Studios, Riot Games, which is the developer of League of Legends, of course. And then they also have stakes in a lot of other companies, including Blizzard, I believe. And they're having their own Chinese fiasco right now. So Tencent, especially in the game industry, specifically in the game industry, they're becoming really scary. And they are pursuing silent global domination because they can. They have access via expansion, primarily in the form of major and minor investments in video games or in the video game industry companies around the world without rebranding them as Tencent, meaning that they are putting their toes in everything that they possibly can. They're putting their hands, rather, in every single major company that they can without necessarily rebranding them, so they get to leverage the strength of those companies while still making a lot of the money. So Riot Games is a perfect example of that. You could be a big League of Legends player and not even know that Tencent is an enormous influence on Riot Games. And here is the next example of that, I guess. They want to get closer to Nintendo. They want to be bedfellows with Nintendo so that they can use all of Nintendo's intellectual property while also getting the benefits of Nintendo branding. They can say this is a Nintendo game, this is a Mario game, when in all reality, Nintendo really had almost nothing to do with it. It was all Tencent. At least that's what they're going for right here. Nintendo's latest commercial features a man with Down syndrome. I think this is going to be a bit smaller of a story, but we're going to watch this commercial here. I haven't seen it yet. Looks like a trailer that was posted on YouTube very recently. Okay, maybe a day ago. That's pretty exciting. Let's link.
Let's do this.
Playing Mario Party, in case you can't see this. A game that I wish had a lot more attention to it. Pokemon Sword and Shield coming out on Friday. Awesome.
Psyching me out there. That's some pretty high stakes.
Oh, there he is. Oh, that's so awesome.
So I got first. Let's go.
Nintendo Switch?
Nintendo Switch. That's my way to play.
Yep.
Nintendo Switch is my way to play.
And they have Nintendo Switch Lite on the side there. I like that marketing. I like how they have the divvied up Nintendo Switch on the left side with the red and Nintendo Switch Lite on the right side. It says new. Make sure that people really know that, hey, you can buy a Switch for cheap now. And also, please do. So let's move back a little bit in this trailer. There he is. That's amazing. I mean, there isn't really that much more to say about this trailer, this commercial, besides the fact that inclusion is always good to see. And I know Microsoft has done a phenomenal job. Last year around the Christmas time period, they had their own commercial, which was all about accessibility. And I thought it was really touching. It was really cool to see. And now we have Nintendo doing something similar. It seems like people on Reddit are also really happy with this. It would be cool if Nintendo took up Microsoft on their offer about sharing their adaptive controller. That would be really awesome, actually, because Microsoft did more than just talk about it. They did more than just make that commercial happen last year. And in other spaces, Microsoft has been a huge Patreon, a huge proponent in being more inclusive with their gaming. And they developed an entire controller that's meant to be adapted, that's meant to be utilized by people who can't necessarily grab onto a normal Xbox One controller and play those games for all sorts of purposes. And it's really cool. If you don't know what I'm talking about, let me search that up real quick so you can see the Microsoft or the Xbox adaptive controller, this little thing. I've yet to see one in person, but it's great that they're doing stuff like that. Nintendo, as far as I know, has not done something similar for the Switch and has not done something similar in recent memory. it would be awesome if Nintendo kind of paired with Microsoft on that, because apparently, and I do remember seeing this at some point, apparently Microsoft did say that they're willing to share that controller with other people for the sake of inclusivity. They're not trying to make this a competitive marker, a reason why you should buy an Xbox over another console. They want more people to play games, and they're really honest about that, and they've been more transparent in this generation than they ever have been, not just with stuff like this, but with their games and stuff. I mean, we have Banjo-Kazooie in freaking Super Smash Bros. That's amazing, right? So I feel like they're being genuine when they say stuff like that, and I would like to see Nintendo take Microsoft up on that offer. That's a really good suggestion. Great commercial. I don't think there really is that much to say about it, but those are kind of like the two main parts, two main stories that I saw that were surrounding like Nintendo as a company that I want to get into before we dive in to Pokemon. Of course, Pokemon Sword and Shield. There's been a non-stop drip and droop of Pokemon Sword and Shield news dropping through the chains over the past few weeks. It makes sense. I mean, Sword and Shield, they're releasing on Friday, just a couple of days away from now. Launch is really close. In fact, I made sure to put this story in there to let people know that the embargo lifts Wednesday. It lifts tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern. That's tomorrow, right? Yep. Today's Tuesday, November 12th. So we're going to find out even more about this very, very soon. But because we're so close to launch, because review copies are out in the wild, because other people have obtained copies, and whether legal or illegal ways, doesn't really matter. The point is that information is spreading, and we're learning a lot more about this game, and that's making some people really upset and some people not that upset. I guess it would be a delicate way of putting it, because the Pokemon boycotts, if you will, or at least the hashtags and the posts and the forum communications talking about how they are not happy with Pokemon Sword and Shield, well, they're really relevant, right? And at the same time, there was a group of people that were trying to do something nice for Game Freak, because there seems to be a lot of controversy surrounding Pokemon Sword and Shield ever since they announced National Dexgate all the way back in June during E3. And they're trying to support the developers there and say, hey, you did a good job, you crossed the finish line, so thank you Game Freak, I think was the hashtag, or thank you Pokemon. Something was spreading around, and it actually got to developers and it touched them, and they're really happy about that. So there's a war, if you will, going on about people who are really upset, people are really happy. And as more information comes out about Pokemon Sword and Shield, the picture will become even clearer. So here's a story that I found, as long as a lot of other people found, thousands of other people found, really unique, was that the sound control settings of Pokemon Sword and Shield are apparently locked behind a key item obtained in the game by an NPC that you don't necessarily have to interact with. The game doesn't tell the people or the player about this NPC or option in any way. And here's a little source image for you to see what they're talking about here. Basically what that means is that in most games, you obviously have the option, I guess not so obviously anymore, am I right? You have the option to go and press pause and go to the settings menu and change the sound options whenever you would like, because why wouldn't you? That just makes way too much sense. If the background music is bothering you, if the sound effects are bothering you, you can go turn that down or turn them off completely. Here in the picture for Sword and Shield, you can see background music, you can see sound effects, you can see Pokemon cries, and you have the option to turn them down. Except what is just leaked out yesterday was that you need these high-tech earbuds in order to do that. You actually need to play the game and obtain an item in order to access this functionality. And what they're highlighting here is that you access it, or you get that item through an optional NPC. So it's technically possible that you can play through the entirety of Pokemon Sword and Shield and just not get it, like not get this setting, not be able to turn down your background music when you really need to, whether you just because you played through and you just completely missed that NPC, or you just started the game and all of a sudden you're like, okay, I want to turn this background music because I don't really care very much, or the cries are annoying me, the sound effects are annoying me. You just can't do that. You can't do that until they give you a reason to do that. Is this nitpicking? Kind of. I mean, it's a little inconvenient. It's pretty annoying. I can see where they're coming from with this high-tech earbud thing. I think they're trying to be clever. I think they were trying to be cool. I mean, the Pokemon franchise has always had this concept of a Pokédex, right? You have a Pokédex, and the Pokédex kind of always meshed with the settings in the Pokemon game. So you got this really interesting design quirk where you could get new things for your Pokédex, like a map, for instance. And then that map would also kind of play into the settings you have for the Pokemon games. And they could be really clever and fun. And I think that's what they were trying to do here, was kind of have something that you can add to your Pokédex or something like that to make it seemed like they were being a little smart here, like saying, hey, wouldn't that be cute? Wouldn't it be cool if you could find these high-tech earbuds and all of a sudden that would change something in your options? Yeah, I mean, I can see that, but at the same time, it's royally annoying. It's intensely annoying when you turn on a game and you just want to get to it. You just want to change something that you definitely should be able to change, but you can't because you have to unlock some XYZ, especially as something as simplistic as just the sound. I can see people getting really annoyed by it. It's by no means a game breaker. It's just a really weird design choice. And that's kind of what the pulse of what people are thinking about this, what people are saying about this is like. What exactly is the purpose of this supposed to be? Says one user, this is actually more work for Game Freak. That's true. When they could have just let it be an option. So they went out of their way to make something that was potentially more annoying. I don't think they saw it that way. I don't think they saw it as being more annoying. I think they genuinely believed that this was cute. I think maybe they thought players would try to go to the settings menu originally and try to turn something down and think, oh, darn, it's not in this game. And then later on, they would find these high-tech earbuds and think, whoa, that was kind of cool or something. That was kind of cute. I don't think that's how it's going to come off as. I think that's what they were hoping for. I definitely disagree with their choice. But again, I'm playing devil's advocate here. I think this is what Game Freak intended with all this. Why would this even be a thing? Your inevitable mom should just give it to you at the very beginning of the game to make it seem like it's itemized, similar to how they did running shoes back in the day. Okay, I see what this person is saying. The Iron Breaker off of Reddit. Yeah, that definitely makes sense to me. If they wanted to be cute, if they wanted to be fun, if they wanted to be silly and do something like this where your Pokedex or something would upgrade after obtaining an item, they probably should have done that super early in the game. And they probably, to be fair, we don't know how early in the game it is that you get those earbuds, but they definitely should have made it something that you just kind of get, right? That you don't have, you can't miss. That is part of the happy path for Pokemon Sword and Shield. And the fact that it's not, I think that is the thing that bothers me the most about this. Not the fact that they were trying to be a little cute, but the fact that it's not on the happy path. It's something that you don't just automatically obtain, and we actually don't know how early it is that you obtain this setting. So one last person said, wait, okay, let me understand. So to adjust volume in the game, we have to go see an NPC instead of just hitting options. That seems like exactly what it is. Except the caveat being you don't have to go to the NPC every time. You go to the NPC, you get an item, and then all of a sudden you have the option now to change the volume. It's a weird choice. It's a weird choice. It's a weird design decision and for a game that is riddled with peculiar design decisions. And we're going to go through a couple more actually before the show is over. Data mines have begun in Pokemon Sword and Shield. Unannounced removal of moves have been found, and if you transfer Pokemon with the move, it no longer works. So what does this mean? Whereas Pokédex or National Dex Gate refers to the fact that Pokemon Sword and Shield will not have all of the Pokemon available in that game. You will not be able to catch every Pokemon available. In fact, I think it's something around 600 Pokemon out of the old school generations are just completely cut. They're not available, including apparently Squirtle, which really saddens me because Squirtle and that entire evolutionary chain, that's my favorite, and he's not going to be in the game. It seems like we have a new gate or a new weird thing called Move Gates. I guess that's what I'm coining it. Essentially, you can transfer some of these Pokemon, and if these Pokemon that you're trying to transfer over to Sword and Shield have moves that aren't supported by Sword and Shield, well, you just kind of lose that move, or it says the move no longer works. I don't know exactly what that means. Moves that have been removed. If you thought Dexagate was bad, wait till you hear about what's happening with moves. The moves can't be used. It's recommended that the move is forgotten. Once forgotten, the move can't be remembered. Oh, okay. So an example of that, they give some moves here. Pursuit is a move, or hidden power. That seems like a really common move. So if you have a Pokemon with hidden power and you transfer them or trade them into Pokemon Sword and Shield, you just have an option that's grayed out, I'm guessing. You just can't move it. You just can't use it. You just can't use hidden power. Your Pokemon has 3 available moves instead of 4, and you have to forget it. And then they're pointing out that once you remove that move permanently, it is permanent, essentially. You forget the move, it can't be remembered. And they give like a long list. I'm not going to go through all the list of moves. It's just another thing to add onto the pile of complaints for this game. I mean, there is going to be so many people, I would imagine, that have been diehard Pokemon fans for the franchise for generations, for years, for decades, right? Who have been falling in love with different Pokemon types and specific Pokemons and really fine-tuning their Pokemon with moves over the years that they have been able to successfully transfer year after year, generation after generation, that are just going to be so disappointed by some of the things that Pokemon Sword and Shield has to offer. And it's just nuts to me the way that they decided to convey this information. Why do it like this? And why not even talk about this, right? They highlight this in this thread where they say unannounced removal, and that's exactly right. Why did they try to be so hush hush all the way to the last second so people wouldn't think about this or know about this when they bought the game, and then once they play the game, they can be disappointed then? I mean, I guess you could argue it's for the money, because when you buy the game, well, they already have your money, so you can be as upset as you want. But it just seems like the hate and all the backlash for Sword and Shield, it's coming. You know, it came anyway. It came before the release anyway. And it seems like if it's going to affect people negatively, it's going to stop people from buying the game. It's going to do that no matter what at this point. And maybe hindsight's 2020, but I don't see why they didn't just rip the Band-Aid off months ago. I don't see why this wasn't part of the conversation all the way back in June when they first even hinted at the fact that we might not have all the Pokemon in Sword and Shield. I don't know why they didn't say things like this. This is a great example that moves, we wouldn't have all the moves either, that we would remove moves and get everyone riled up as much as it did back then. Again, people would be even more angry back then than they were, even though people were pretty upset back in June and throughout the summer. But I feel like by the time you got to here, by the time you got to November, by the time you got to a few days before Pokemon Sword and Shield actually releases, the tide would have turned. I don't think people would be nearly as upset now. I think you would have made peace with it. I don't think, of course, people wouldn't be fully accepting of those choices. Sure, I mean, there'd still be people that are pissed off. There'd still be people that are deciding not to buy the game because of design choices like this. Absolutely, I'm not saying that they wouldn't exist, but at the very least, these type of stories wouldn't be making it to the top of forums, to all the websites, and like making the rounds across the media industry, and having people talk about how weird and disappointed people are in Pokemon Sword and Shield at a critical time period for the Pokemon Company and Game Freak and Nintendo, where they're really trying to sell people on this game. It's their huge holiday title, and yet all of the conversations so far before the embargo lifts, which is again tomorrow morning, has been skewing largely negative. That just seems so bizarre to me. If I was in Game Freak's place, I feel like I would have just unleashed all this information as much as I could way back when, as early as possible, get it over with. So by the time we got here, if there are people that are trying to make a stink about it and talk about it online, I don't think it nearly would have get that same level of attention, because people are going to say, well, I already know. It's fine. Maybe when the game comes out, then you'll have like retrospective pieces and thought pieces about how that's affected the actual gameplay. It's just a bizarre thing to do, and it doesn't surprise me that moves specifically going back to this choice that are not in the game, because if they're going to take away 600 Pokemon, of course, why wouldn't they also remove some moves? And if you're going to remove some moves, what better way to do it? Like it's you're already in a world of trouble. Like, no, I don't think there is a great way of fixing that problem of okay, like I transfer a Pokemon over, what's the correct way to deal with a move that no longer exists in the game? Do we still let the move happen? We just don't show any animations or something like that? I mean, that doesn't seem very smart, and that also doesn't really give you a reason for why the moves were removed in the first place if you can still use the moves. Do you give people the option, perhaps, of what they want to change that move to when you trade? Okay, well, what if you don't give people the right options? It's like, no matter what, this decision was going to be sticky. I just wish that they had talked about it earlier, if possible. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe they didn't know until weeks ago or something like that. But I really doubt it. It seemed like a lot of this stuff they knew. They just didn't want to talk about very much. And that's that wouldn't be the way I did it. And here's what's this? Okay, that's the review embargo. So here's the final story we have for Pokemon Sword and Shield. The final little thing that squeaked by, which probably in comparison to some of the other things I've talked about is the least harmful, but I will mention it. Pokemon Sword and Shield seem to be locked to 30 frames per second in both docked and handheld mode, with game speed tied to frame rate. Okay, so no 60 frames a second for Pokemon Sword and Shield. Is it going to hurt the experience significantly, especially a game like Pokemon? No. Let's be honest, it's not going to hurt the game significantly. I think where this comes from, where the frustration comes from with this portion, is that this is a first party mega game coming from Nintendo. Like, this is their highlight. This is the star of the show. This is their piece de resistance for 2019. Coming from a veteran game company like Game Freak that's been around for so long, a company that makes billions, right? I don't know if it all goes to Game Freak, but the Pokemon franchise, the Pokemon brand makes billions and billions of dollars, and yet they can't reach certain milestones, certain achievements that are standard across the industry and across Nintendo first party too. I mean, how many first party Nintendo games don't reach 60 frames per second? I mean, it's not that common, and it's also not common anymore for any first party developers across the board. That's what's so frustrating about Game Freak and the first big push onto home consoles for Pokemon not reaching 30 frames per second. Again, is it going to hurt the actual gameplay and design? No, it's just a big question mark. They're like, why are we here? Why are we in a place where people already kind of look at Sword and Shield, they look at the models, they look at how that game runs, and they say, well, it kind of just looks like a souped up handheld game, right? It doesn't look like a fully blown home console game, and yet it still can't achieve things that you would expect from home console games. It can't achieve things like 60 frames per second in some weird way. And I think the one thing that isn't mentioned here that bothers me even more about 30 frames per second is that it doesn't have cloud save functionality. Like, what? Are we serious? They can't even have cloud saves work properly in Pokemon Sword and Shield. I pay extra to be part of the Nintendo Switch Online membership, and I can't get my Pokemon Sword and Shield save backed up on the cloud so that if I put in hundreds of hours into that game, training up my Pokemon, catching all of the available Pokemon, not all of them, but all the available ones, I can't have any promise or any ease of mind that I won't lose it all because it doesn't support any cloud saves. Is this a train wreck? Is it? Like, is this not this specifically, not the story specifically, all of it, everything combined for Pokemon Sword and Shield? It just seems like it's been negative wave after negative wave after negative wave, and I try to stay unbiased, and I try to not make any judgments until I've actually played the game, but it's hard. It's hard, especially when they just keep giving you excuses or keep giving me excuses to kind of scratch my head and say, what? Why? Yes, Sword and Shield is a train wreck. Well, it definitely seems like that, right? It definitely seems like that, Megan, that it might be a train wreck because I don't understand why they're having so much trouble developing this game. Maybe it was not even close to being ready and they had to push something out and Nintendo needed the game out by this time period. Let's give them the benefit of that. I'm sure my husband will be buying it anyways. I'm sure millions and millions of people will be buying it anyways. It would not surprise me in the slightest if it's one of the best-selling games that are available during this holiday season because it's Pokemon and that franchise just prints money. You know, some franchises are ironclad like that and Pokemon is one of them, but it's just hard to believe that we're here. And I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that when the review embargo lifts, even though I probably won't spend that much time looking at the review embargoes or the reviews that have been available now because the embargo lifted, just because I don't want to be spoiled completely. I'm sure we're going to get a much clearer picture then, but it might be too soon to tell. We're going to play the game. We're going to see what that's all about. So hopefully that changes my mind. If it doesn't, hopefully Game Freak sees this as an opportunity, a learning opportunity, to kind of go back to the drawing board and say, let's try something different next time. You know, the Pokemon franchise is almost annualized at this point. We kind of get a Pokemon experience every year. Last year we got Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. This year we're going to get Sword and Shield. I'm hoping next year we just don't get one. How about that? How about we don't get a Pokemon next year? They take a break. We don't get anything. And instead, the year after, that's when we see Pokemon again. So I guess that's my wish. And that's done with Pokemon news. Let's get to the big deal over here. The rumor that Nintendo is targeting 2020 next year release for Breath of the Wild sequel. Of course, Breath of the Wild 2 was announced at E3 this year to the pure happiness of me and a bunch of other people because I absolutely adore Breath of the Wild, and Zelda is my favorite gaming franchise. Not a wholly original choice, I know, but whatever. I can't do anything about it. I love Zelda. I loved Breath of the Wild. I'm so stoked for a sequel, and the fact that it could come out next year makes complete sense to me. You assume that they're using a very similar engine to Breath of the Wild, so they already did all of the really hard work I would imagine, although there's plenty of work to do. And that game came out in 2017, March 2017. So we're about to hit, what, we're in 2019, we're about to hit 3 years and then some, and then change. 3 years and change at that point for Breath of the Wild 2, assuming that it doesn't come out in March or before March. Breath of the Wild 2 next year seems like it's a holiday game. It seems like this is the big push that you would put out right before the holidays as a differentiator to say, I know that there are these big behemoths, the Xbox 2 or whatever they're going to call it, the PlayStation 5, around this time period that are trying to vie for your attention. But look at the Switch, which is on sale or something like that during the holiday season, and we have Breath of the Wild 2. Like, how badass is that? I think that's the marketing plan that they hope to go for, and it's going to be almost 4 years. It's going to be 3.5 years of a development time since Breath of the Wild 1, although I would assume that the Zelda team did have to split off a little bit to work on Link's Awakening, the remake that just came out in September, so it hasn't been fully on the Breath of the Wild. The development team hasn't been fully on the Breath of the Wild 2 train, I would imagine, but at the same time, like, still 3.5 years, even with part of a team, is a lot. It's a lot of time, and I feel like it's definitely enough for the sequel to make sense. Let's get into why they think that is, actually. Sabi is a leaker with a good track record for uncovering big stories. And apparently Sabi tweeted out on the 12th, today, that I would tell you Breath of the Wild 2 is planned to release in 2020, but Zelda release dates are historically delayed internally or publicly. Okay, so it just looks like there is a leaker who tends to know his stuff. He tends to be more right than wrong occasionally. I've never heard of Sabi before, but I'm trusting Nintendo enthusiasts to not lie to me at this point, saying that it is planned to be released in 2020. Honestly, I feel like that's probably fair. I feel like if I'm just going to think about what Nintendo has to offer in 2020, they decided to show it off this year. So that means that they can't be too far out from release. If they were, then they would probably have showed off other things that we haven't seen yet, like Bayonetta 3. We haven't seen any of that yet. So that kind of lends me to believe that that game isn't anywhere near release. But Breath of the Wild 2, probably a little bit. And like I said before, it definitely feels like it would fit perfectly into that second half of the year big holiday title. I'm not sure what else would, besides maybe a surprise Mario outing, 2D Mario Odyssey 2. I mean, a man can dream. If 2020 was Mario Odyssey 2, Breath of the Wild 2, God, that would make me so happy. That would just be a real awesome thing, right? A real awesome treat. I definitely buy this rumor. I definitely think Nintendo is trying, at the very least, to release Breath of the Wild 2 at the end or by the end of 2020. It does seem like a game that can carry enough weight to make people look at the Switch and say, yeah, that's a really sweet deal. I feel like I'm going to game on the Switch, or I'm going to buy a Switch this year instead of paying however much money the PlayStation 5 or its competitors are going to be next year, and maybe wait for those things to go down in price, because Nintendo has some really good options in 2020. What do you guys think about that? I buy into it. I'm all for it. Oh yeah, and here's what Reddit thinks about it. It's planned for 2020, but it can also be delayed. It's really easy to never be wrong with a leak when you do it like this. That's true. That's absolutely true. So Sabi, again, a guy that I've never even really heard of. You can say things like that, and you can always be half right, and you can tell half truths. Leakers are notorious for doing things like that, so I hope that's not the case here. Again, I feel like it makes sense regardless of that. That would be the craziest E3 mic drop announcement. So they're assuming that 2020, saying that Breath of the Wild 2 is coming out this year. And then this guy says the best kind of rumor is one you can never prove wrong, because as they said, it'll probably get delayed unless it's released in 2019. So a lot of people are skeptical. They have every right to be so. I mean, this is not at all coming from a source in specific that knows their stuff, at least for that I'm concerned. And they also mentioned that it could be delayed, but again, I definitely think this fits the bill. It definitely seems like something Nintendo wants to do. Whether it will happen, I don't know. I didn't think that Super Smash Bros. Could make it out at the end of last year, but it did. I didn't think they could have a Pokemon game ready this fast, especially with 2 Pokemon games within the first 3 years of the Switch's release, but they did. They've been surprising me a lot with a lot of their releases for the Nintendo Switch generation. So if they're going to surprise me again, if they're going to surprise the world again and have Zelda come out so soon and on time, on schedule, that would be pretty darn cool, don't you think? And that's everything. That's everything we have for the nightly Nintendo show. Thanks for tuning in with me and going through all the latest headlines. We will return tomorrow to talk about everything that happened in the world of Nintendo tomorrow night. Peace out, guys.